Thank you very much for making time to share your insights into the future of leadership. But before we go into the future, can you tell us a little bit more about your own background? Where did you grow up?
So I was born in Stellenbosch in the Western Cape, in the old South Africa. So I was born into the old racist South Africa, into a Afrikaans home, which I would say through conditioning would be a racist home. I grew up in that area my whole life. Pretty average performer at school level, not really good at sport, very good at mathematics. So somehow I've got a natural gift for maths. My father was alcoholic, which made our household a very challenging one. So I grew up with little means, I would say, by old South African standards. I mean, by no means did we live in a shack, which is still an atrocity till this day for me. But I had to fight for moving forward in life because of a dysfunctional father. I wanted to become an engineer to make money.
Was that your dream career? Or what was
your
dream career?
Dream career was civil engineering. And I suppose it's similar to what I experience in the township schools that I work with today. The kids want to become engineers, doctors, lawyers. And the assumption is that is how you make money. So my ambition was to make money, and hence engineering. So the ambition was to make money, and engineering to me was not because I thought I love it or I have a passion for it. It was just I want to make money. And then I fell into art completely by luck and studied art and built my career on first being an artisan and then becoming an entrepreneur at the age of 29. Although looking back, I realized I was actually an entrepreneur at the age of 12 because that's when I started working for income.
So how did you get into advertising?
Back then, I was in the war in Angola, and I was waiting for a plane at an Air Force base named Rundu. And back in those days, I was doing my 2 years national service, which was enforced on us as young people. And there was a guy there who was older, and they were doing camps. So people were called back for camps, to do a camp. So he was doing a 3-month camp. Mm-hmm. And he was waiting for the same plane, just the two of us on the tarmac waiting for this massive plane. And he had his portfolio with him, which is bizarre. I mean, I don't understand why he would have his portfolio. And I didn't even know what a portfolio was, but he showed me this book and it had his designs in it. And I was attracted naturally. I mean, before that, I didn't know that I had a talent for it, but I was attracted to this thing that he was doing. So I went to investigate it when I got back to South Africa and went to art school to study graphic design. That's how it started.
So who inspired you in your early days?
Who inspired me? I would say my mother, definitely, because by the age of 14, my father was out of the home. I mean, he was not present for 10 years before that already, but so my mother definitely, she raised 3 children on a teacher's salary, which was pretty small back in the day, and she successfully did it. She gave us a home. So I'd definitely say my mother, and also because she's got a very strong will and a strong belief, and she's extremely hardworking. So I would say that's definitely was one of my inspirations. Another 2 would be her 2 brothers, who were then already very successful entrepreneurs. They left home at the age of, I think, 13. They were kicked out of home because the family couldn't feed them. So they never finished school. They both got standard 6, grade 8, grade 7 and 8. And they worked, and through their sheer physical efforts, they are highly successful entrepreneurs today. But they came from nothing.
And during your career, who inspired you?
During my career, let me think about that. Career-wise, it's very interesting. I mean, I had some people that I worked for before I started my business that had a hand in me being where I am today. One of them would be a creative leader who's now living in New York called Matthew Bull. I worked for him for 18 months and he opened my eyes to creativity, true creativity. He comes to mind. I worked at Network BBDO for 2 years. which was led by Mike Shallett. So in my industry, internationally, in my craft, I look towards David Droger. I wouldn't say I look up to other humans. I mean, I absolutely look up towards probably Nelson Mandela, Gandhi, Jesus Christ. I mean, and I'm not even a practicing Christian, but I think the notion of those leaders and the way they led. So I'm not taking, if there was a man named Jesus, I'm not taking it in the Christian context, but someone who can actually not judge and love to that level. I aspire to that. I don't know if there's many people who live like that. So I would say those are the people I aspire to.
And Pepe, looking back over your career, was there a turning point or maybe a couple of turning points where you took a decision? There were three fundamental points in my life that massively impacted me. The first would be when I discovered art. So the school system at that stage, I wanted to get out of the school system at the age of 14. My mother didn't want to allow me to. She wanted me to finish matric. I wanted to get out. And I think it's because the system made me feel that I'm not good enough because I wasn't performing. It was grading me, and I was a D, so I was a donkey. So when I discovered art, every single year I cum lauded my course. I was top of my class. And with that came massive self-confidence, which I didn't have at that stage. So my ability in sport actually improved because of my self-belief, because now I found something I was really good at. So what sport did you practice?
After that, I started practicing paddle skiing. So it's like a surfing, sort of a sport in the ocean. And I also started playing squash, and I did both at a very good level. For the amount of focus I put into it, I did both at a very, very good level. If I had to full-time focus on squash, I would probably be like a top squash player in the country.
Do you still play today?
I gave up squash 11 years ago because my son was born, and I didn't want to compromise my time with him. And I'll probably start again when he gets to about 16, and he starts realizing there's bigger things to life than his dad and his mum. So that would be the first big thing was realization of art, which gave me for the first time at the age of 20 like a level of self-confidence that there's something in me that's good enough.
Right.
The second big turning point for me was at the age of 38. Fundamentally changed my life is when I found my life's purpose, which was profound as an experience. And the third massive experience was the birth of my son. So those three are probably the most critical life milestones.
Now, your life's purpose, what can you tell us what it is?
So it's an interesting thing. Before I just put it out there what it is, it's a very interesting field that I'm in, this field of marketing and advertising, because it's very strategic. And when I went bankrupt at 38, after working for so many years so hard and being really good at what I did, it didn't make sense to me because my intention, my efforts, everything was aligned, but the output resulted in nothing.
So what happened? How did you end up?
So I went on a deep introspection. I did some transformational workshops, and it made me wonder, even before I did the transformational workshops, I started thinking, why don't I have a strategy? We do strategies for brands, 3 to 5 years, which is quite short. But why don't I have even a strategy beyond next weekend at that stage in my life? So when I went and did this transformational workshop, it's just a workshop. It's not like it's magic. But the way that they constructed the workshop and the way that I gained this insight on my life, it actually gave me a strategy for my life. And it made me write a 25-year plan for my life in 2007 towards 2032. Right. With milestones which I've achieved every step along the way. So purpose, my purpose is it's one word. It's called greatness, is my purpose. But the interesting thing is what I also learned, because after the workshop I did a lot of interrogation, a lot more other work, and a lot of investigation, because I was so interested, like, why don't we know about this as another way of being? And it's more important what the word means than what the word is. Because if I just say, I'm greatness, it sounds quite arrogant. but the meaning of the word is to bring out the best in those around me. So my purpose in this world, even through this interview, is to bring out the best to whoever listens to it. And I also learned then fundamentally, because we know all this stuff, but we don't apply it. Like Gandhi says, be the change. We heard this 1,000 times, but we don't really take responsibility to be that change. So I overnight stopped drinking. I became a vegan. I cut my hair. I had long hair. I had bells on my toes. I overnight just went back to my purest form. I lost 20 kilograms. And I realized if I'm going to advocate to kids in townships or to anyone that excessive drinking takes away our effectivity and our productivity, then best I don't drink at all, because I can't kind of be half pregnant.
Sure.
That's just my nature.
So what is it that stops us from being the change?
Habits. I'm writing a book now on that. I'm busy writing my second book, and I chose to write it on habits because I wrote the first one on purpose. So Growing Greatness, I wrote the book on purpose, my experience of it. And I'm very clear that that's just my view. There must be thousands of various views, but that's my belief that I put in a book. And then when I thought about a second book, literally about a month ago in my sickbed, I thought maybe I can add more value. So it's aligned to bringing out the best, because now people are asking a similar question. And I realized it's habits. So if I'm born into an Afrikaans home, by habit I'm going to learn to speak Afrikaans. By habit I'm going to learn to eat. In Afrikaans it's rice, vleis and aardappels, but rice, meat and potatoes. By habit I'm probably going to become a Christian. By habit I'm probably going to vote for the Democratic Party. So now I form all these belief systems, but they're based on someone else's habit. So my habits are other people's habits, and I end up not being able to think for myself. So I started in 2007 when I found my purpose. I had all these habits, like whether it's swearing, whether it's emotional outbursts, which is just a habit learned from a house where my father was abusive. So now that habit sits in my unconscious, and as an adult I behave in that way. And I started replacing those habits with more positive habits. So I don't call them good or bad habits, but I think we as people have a lot of habits that limit us. And the only way to eradicate a limiting habit is to replace it with a liberating habit. So just find a habit that's more positive. So I replaced drinking booze with drinking water.
Right.
Or I replaced eating meat with eating vegan. I'm not advocating that. That works for me.
Right. So Pepe, what kind of legacy would you like to leave?
So I'm very clear. So I suppose my vision would be the legacy. You know, it's an interesting question, that one. What legacy would you like to leave? Because the way the question's structured, it almost sounds quite self-serving to want to leave a legacy. You know, so I wouldn't want to be remembered. Oh, he's so great. I wouldn't want that. But if I can play my part, or maybe if I can play a magnificent role in overhauling education in this country, in order to serve people, to maybe find greater purpose at a younger age, I mean, that would be, I would have lived a fantastic life if I can do that. I wouldn't be obsessed about doing that in order to be remembered. I don't really mind if I'm not remembered, but my vision is to create an educational system that's a shining example to the world, because I think the system is broken. The output is not where it should be. You can't say the system that we're following at the moment works if 80% of the world can't flourish. So something's wrong.
So what would the new education system look like?
So another good question. I mean, you've done a PhD. So I realized in order for me to really interrogate what that would look like, because I'll share with you my sense of what it should be. But I'm thinking at a scalable level, because there's 27,000 schools in South Africa, of which 22,000 are dysfunctional, factually, 80%. So we are contributing to our already dysfunctional economy 80% more people that are not functioning at the level they should function. But now at the same time, if you even interrogate the 20%, 5% of the schools are top schools. Now, I don't have the data. So I'm speaking from almost from a sense.
Right.
So it's not qualified yet. But in my experience, when I work with people as a business owner, I realize that even people from private schools are not maximizing their experience of life. So even that level school is limiting people. So I've started my journey at the beginning of this year towards a PhD as well, but because I've only got a level 6 and my 30 years of business experience only fast tracks me by law to have level 7. I'm busy doing my 8, and then I have to do an MBA, and then hopefully I'll do a PhD on the scalable solution for education in our country. So I'll have the full answer if you had to ask me in 5 years' time. But for now, I think the educational system is based only on IQ. And I would like to reduce the amount of IQ subjects, not take it out of the fold, but reduce it down to what is critically most needed. So that if you want to do science, then I think go and specialize in it once you get to tertiary. But at the sort of basic education level, rather have less academic subjects, and maybe the bare minimum would be a key language. If it's a language that gets taught at university, let's teach that as a first language, so that there's not such a high dropout zone. I know we learn better in our home language as an Afrikaans person, but it's not practically possible to build 11 different universities teaching 11 different languages. It's not possible. It's not practical. And maybe a second subject could be maths, because I think it's such a fundamental language in itself in terms of art and business and science. And then open up the opportunity to teach more business or leadership fundamentals like purpose at school level, like values, emotional intelligence, spiritual intelligence. So I'd like to have EQ, IQ, SQ, and maybe resilience as a quotient.
Right.
And create subject and content around it and experiences at a school level. So we've got more people that are more equipped to face the world, which there's such a focus on hard skills, the numbers, and soft skills is non-existent, but the soft skills are probably 1,000 times harder than the hard skills. So
now, Pepe, let's talk about leadership.
Yeah.
What does the future of leadership mean to you?
Consciousness comes to mind, and it's because this has been my transformation. I'm so far from where I should be. Like Malcolm X, he said, I'm a long way from where I was, but I'm still a long way from where I want to be, which is a beautiful statement and so humble for someone who's achieved as much as him. And maybe I'd like to follow in his footsteps of humility and say, I've done a hell of a lot of work in 12 years on my own personal leadership style, but I'm still far from where I want to be in my own behavior, because often I still make people feel that they're not good enough, and that is counter my purpose. So I'm still in the habit, much less than say 5, 6, 7 years ago, because I've done so much work, but I still often make people feel that they're not good enough, because I want them to be great, but I come across as if they're not good enough. So, but the future of leadership is consciousness. Because I think that's what's lacking most in the world. I don't think as leaders we do things, we don't wake up in the morning with the intention of doing bad. Leaders of massive corporations. I just don't think we're conscious of the impact of whether it's our words or our actions or our business behaviors. And then of course the capitalistic system has got a bad rap because there are abuse. It's definitely been abused. There's too much wealth sitting with too few people and too many people living in poverty. And that to me is consciousness. We go, as long as my family is fine, as long as we're surviving and thriving, who cares about the rest? So consciousness, I think, is most critically needed in leadership.
Now, Pepe, what have you learned from your own journey that you consider most important for building future leaders?
Willingness to be wrong comes up first for me. It's one I'm really working on at the moment. So this has happened through my experience even in the last week. and it's all fear-based. So what I've learned through my own journey is I want to be right. And again, it's not that I want to be a bad person, but it comes from a place of fear because I don't want to fail. So I want to be right in everything. And I realized that when I'm willing to be wrong and I actually open my mind to someone else's thinking, I double my own thinking. So just to open my mind to it. Even when I fundamentally believe I'm right, just to open my mind. And then last week I had an experience where I went, wow, when I open myself up to someone else's feeling, I actually double my own feeling, which gets to a point of empathy. But this is new learning. I'm very self-righteous. I'm a business leader. Sometimes I've had people comment to me, it's your way or the highway. It's not completely true, but it's being said, so there must be some truth in it. So I do think that, so even in me saying that, I realize I'm already more and more willing to be wrong. So I don't just go, that's wrong, I'm not like that. I'm going, well, someone's perceiving me like that, so I'm doing something that makes them say it. So I think step number one is just stepping into a place of willingness to be wrong. And another one, now that I say it, is this notion of I know nothing. I worked it out mathematically. I went and did a percentage on everything that's out there possibly to know, and it came to 0, and it was probably like about 14 zeros, 1% is what I know of what there is to know in the world. So I know nothing, which makes me open to ask questions without feeling stupid to ask a question. Because if I'm the oldest and the wisest guy in the room, I don't mind looking like an idiot.
Well, that's what Socrates used to say.
There we go. So that to me is my number 2 most important thing that I'm trying to stick to at the moment, is not to profess that I'm this wise guy. And to your point, I think all knowledge has been out there probably for for thousands of years, and we just don't live it. So I suppose the next thing is how do we start to, like, if we know, be the change. That's one thing. That's why I always say knowledge is not power, because you have to apply it. So the third thing to me would be to live what I say I live. So once I wrote the book on it, I became quite aware that it's one thing to write all these nice fancy stuff, but to live it. That would be my 3 insights.
Now, Pepe, when you speak to aspiring leaders, what is it you tell them? How should they navigate around social media? And how should they go about building their personal brand on social media?
I'm not the best person to ask, because I've learned through mistakes. I mean, there was a time a couple of years ago when I used to bash government all the time because I was so frustrated. And that didn't look like good leadership to me, if I look back at that. That behavior, pointing fingers at someone else. I mean, I'm not knowledgeable. I'm very active in the social space, and I've become positive 99.9% of the time. I keep what I put out there very inspirational. I almost use it as a way of reminding myself what I stand for. But I made a mistake. That's what I learned last week. I commented on how someone else was feeling because I felt offended by the way they were feeling. And in my experience with the debate that opened up afterwards, I realized it wasn't really my place to be offended how someone else is offended. I was offended by someone else's offense. So they say, don't put in the social space what you wouldn't put on a billboard out there next to a road. And we very easily go and do that. So I've made a lot of mistakes, but I'm more conscious now. But I would say, if you're in that space, rather focus on yourself and your own beliefs and the positive side of those beliefs than just putting your views out there.
And Pepe, as a mentor to future leaders, can you maybe share a success story or two where you mentored somebody and that person took your advice to heart?
So, I mentor quite a few people. I mean, I've actually got quite a lot of people when I think about it. That's in my fold. I'm going to mention a letter that I received this morning from a 16-year-old who attended a thought leadership where I spoke a few months ago. It actually brought tears to my eyes because, as a mentor to people, I'm trying to work on what is this humility place where I come from, because there's an Afrikaans saying that says, if you're overly humble, it's almost a sign of arrogance. So I don't want to be overly humble. But I think it's part of being brought up Afrikaans. I'm not always aware of what impact I have on other people's lives. I'm probably positive impact. I'm more aware of the negative because I get the feedback more. But I've been getting a lot of positive feedback on my impact that I am making. And this one in particular was this young 16-year-old girl who's dreaming of being an entrepreneur one day, who came to entrepreneurship event, the youngest one there.
Right.
Because that's a dream, and at school people are saying it's a waste of your time, you're only 16, and she's at a hostel. And somehow what I said on the stage made such an impact on her that she used her pocket money for food for the day to buy my book, which she then read almost at the it took away a time that she should have been studying because she really enjoyed it. And she then started advocating some of the things in my book in the school, which then started spreading onto all the blackboards throughout the school.
Right.
I only heard that today. So it's probably why it's top of mind, because I was quite taken aback that you can have that level of impact. Because if you can change one person's life, then you've done a pretty good job.
What school is it?
I don't know. I don't even have a clue. So I've started corresponding with her now, but I was really moved by it because I thought, it maybe makes me also aware that when we are in positions of leadership, how carefully we must actually choose our words. And that's going to have to be my work for the next 5 years, is to become more mindful of what comes out of my mouth. Because often I'll still work for my gut, so I'll just say something. And it doesn't often serve people. It's quite nice when you write something because you really consider it, because it's going out there.
Sure.
I rewrote it 3 times. So, maybe I should start speaking like I'm writing.
So would you say we should maybe rethink the notion of influence and being an influencer in these days of everybody wanting to influence and being an influencer marketer?
Okay, well, that's interesting. So I don't even know what's in your mind what your question brings up for me is there's an incredible amount of looking outside of ourselves. So even when you go, I want to influence people, start with influencing yourself. And that's very interesting because I did a process once years before where we had to vote for people to live or die, and we each had 5 votes. And out of 100 people, not one person voted for themselves. So we don't vote for ourselves in life, but we want life to vote for us. We talk terrible language in our heads to ourselves, like I'm stupid, or I'm such an idiot. We wouldn't like if other people speak to us like that, but we speak to ourselves like that. I started a practice 10 years ago, almost to the date, where I started looking at myself in the mirror every day saying I love myself and I am amazing. And I do that every single day. I did it this morning. And that practice has built a high level of self-respect. And I don't think we do enough of that. So I would say we should probably become more concerned with self-influence before we become concerned about influencing others. Because I think at the lack of having introspection and understanding of the self, all the news we're putting out there is fake. So my life pre-38 was amazing, but it was pretty fake. And what I would have put out there would have been to serve my ego. And what I put out there now is in service of others, profoundly so. It's coming from a really deep place of service. No one needs to know that, but I know that. So I would definitely say, start with self-influence. Influence yourself first.
Now, Pepe, are there any role models of leadership that you would recommend future leaders should study and maybe learn from?
So again, I don't know enough, but ones that are coming to my mind right now, is probably John Mackey of Whole Foods in America.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, to me, I think there's a I don't know enough about him. I watched a few things on him.
Right.
He speaks my language, and he's been speaking it long before me. So I go, okay, I'm aligned to his thinking. But in general, I've not found people I can really look up to that really are advocating we should stand for something greater than making of money. Hence my role models still remain the more high-level spiritual role models,
Right.
which I mentioned early on. But I just want to think if there's anyone else. Brené Brown, there's one. Just in terms of a leader and someone with a thought leadership platforms globally acclaimed, and her thinking.
Right.
It's all more about creating more loving environments, more caring environments, and finding something to exist for beyond just money.
Right.
And so interestingly, as I'm now speaking about it, Phil Knight comes up as a business leader, the founder of Nike.
Right.
And his book is profound. The book Shoe Dog is so beautifully written, and I think he must have written it post-70, so there's a high level of wisdom and experience there.
Right.
But he wrote, and I don't know if many people who read that book picked up how profound is. There was one particular statement towards the end of the book where he said, we all understand that in order to live, your blood needs to flow through your veins. So your heart must pump and blood must flow.
Sure.
But if you ask me, why do I exist? I don't say to make blood. And a business operates in the same way. You know, the blood must flow to keep the business alive, but you don't exist to make the blood. The blood it's just there. It's
Right.
I don't think there's enough leaders yet who truly believes that. I believe that, and I'm trying to spread that word.
Now, Pepe, how can future leaders connect with you, and where should they follow you?
So I'm very active. So I'm not on Facebook. I find it a huge waste of my time. But I'm very active on Twitter. So my Twitter handle is @Pepe Marais, PEPMARAIS. And I use Twitter more as a platform just to motivate myself. So I'm conscious with my morning reflections that I actually that I use it more as a self-reflection than to share messages. So I'm very active there, and people engage with me on that platform. And then I'm very open to anyone emailing me on my business email, which is pepe@joepublic.co.za, because I find I love engaging with people, and it doesn't take that much time to respond to someone who reaches out. Just reminded me though, I've been working with a young entrepreneur called Marnus Broederyk. I mean, he's young in age, but he's got vast experience in entrepreneurship. He's built quite a few different businesses at that age.
Right.
And I was sharing his platform, which he invited me to a few weeks ago. And he reminded me that the most successful person in the future will probably be least on their cell phones. So I'm also now very conscious of the social space. There's a place for it, but be very conscious of how much time you spend there, because it comes at the cost of spending first-hand time with people.
So face-to-face communication is
One of my habits in my book is going to be that sort of FaceTime with real time. So I'm quite big on that.
Now, Pepe, last but not least, is there one piece of advice that you would really like to convey to future leaders that they should implement in their own life?
I mean, without a doubt in my mind, and I will be beating this drum till the day they put me in the grave and put that lid on just to shut me up, but it will have to be that every single human being on this planet has a greater purpose. And if you take the time to really and profoundly discover it, it is far from what you think it is. But if you do the deep work to find out what it is, it will serve you like beyond comprehension. And then second to that is, if you are in business leadership, once you've done that, if you can find what is the greater purpose of your business, because it is not the same as your own. Because a business is like your child. It's not, you don't own it. Otherwise it will be your slave. I mean, Mervyn King, who wrote the King's Commission, he will be very clear on one of the fundamentals is that we don't enslave our businesses by thinking because we started it or founded it, it belongs to us. It doesn't. So with that comes the thought that it has a different purpose to your own. And if you can find that, it will unlock your business's potential beyond comprehension.
Well, Pepe, thank you so much for sharing your insights and your wisdom into the future of leadership and reminding us that there is a path to greatness in all of us.
Yeah, absolutely. Fundamentally, no matter where you are, the context you're born into does not define your potential. It doesn't. And I'm very aware that there's so many people that's born into such horrendous context in this country, but it need not define you. It might just be part of your journey. And if you can see that, you might unlock your true potential.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.